Welcome back to the Base Talk podcast. I am your host, Jacob Billingsley, owner and founder of Base Sports Performance in Hernando, Mississippi. This is part 2 of an interview series with professional athlete RJ Freure discussing college summer ball options and summer training development. All right, sweet. So welcome back to the podcast. As I mentioned today, we are with RJ Freure, former Houston Astro, as well as former teammate of mine. So RJ, welcome to the show, man.
Billingsley, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, heck yeah. So just to kind of give the audience an idea of what's going on, we were texting last week or the week before, kind of discussing, some topics for the podcast as well as your training, seeing how things were going. And you mentioned the topic and the idea of college summer ball, whether it is the high school kids that are committed, getting ready to go to college, or even if it's just like a college athlete trying to determine if or where they should go to summer ball. And I thought that was a really, really good topic. So, kind of a couple things that you mentioned that you wanted to talk about were who should, who shouldn't, and kind of some options besides summer ball as well. So, kind of going back to your college summer ball days, where and when did you play summer ball?
Yeah, so I played at the University of Pittsburgh, and my first freshman year I played for Chatham Anglers in the Cape Cod League. So I spent a year out there my freshman year, and then my sophomore year I was actually draft eligible that year, so I only spent 3 weeks in the Cape that year before signing with the Astros. So I spent about a year and almost like 2 years I was going to summer ball. Decided to take that route instead of staying back.
And were you in Chatham both years?
Yeah.
So obviously Cape Cod is, at the time was definitely the best place to play collegiate summer ball. So obviously that was a really good one to play in. How'd the summer go? Do you feel like you had really good summers? Obviously the second one, it got cut short a little bit early for the draft, but for the time that you did spend there, what would you say were kind of some of the benefits, and what were some of the things that you might have done differently if you could?
Yeah, so at the time, remote coaching wasn't really big at the time. It was always just, go to summer ball. That was the main priority coming up. That's what all the coaches push. So for me, I just didn't see that there was any other option besides going to the Cape and playing summer ball. For me, my experience there was phenomenal. I loved it. I met really good teammates, some guys that I still keep in touch with today, and guys that I actually ended up playing with and against in the future, which was kind of cool to meet up again. And it gives you a different perspective because the whole season you're with one team. You could be the big fish in a small pond at that school, but then when you go to some of these summer ball teams, you get humbled really quick because there's a lot of you out there, and it's kind of a realistic look at what pro ball would be like. So there are many benefits, in my opinion, for me to go to that. I wanted to immerse myself with the top talent. I wanted to immerse myself with that kind of culture and to see how I stacked up against these guys that are coming from Texas, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, etc. And how did I match up against them? And it's and you start picking their brain and talking to them. So it could be a really good learning experience. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. I had a phenomenal 2 years in the Cape. But now that I start seeing it and the way that the industry is going, and with remote coaching and the level of training facilities that we have nowadays and their accessibility all across the country, I started to question, do kids today need that experience? Or is it kind of moving past that narrative, and now we're trying to attack is self-improvement the bigger goal. And so I don't know about what your coaches push, but I just know from the day we walked on, we were prepping for summer ball. That's kind of like we wanted the season near the end. It's like, hey, we're going to get you fitted to summer ball. So I'm not sure what Mississippi State was like, but that was definitely pushed at our school.
Yeah, no, summer ball was definitely, it was kind of like you mentioned, it really wasn't an option. There weren't really other conversations. That was the conversation. And like you mentioned, summer ball, obviously a lot of really good things can come from that. Like you said, especially if you're a guy maybe that needs some innings and you want to, you didn't get as many innings as you wanted in the spring, and you kind of need to go ahead and build that throwing capacity and get some innings in. That's going to be a really good fit. And then, like you said, the other part of that is you do get to play with some guys, especially if you're at a pretty good summer ball where they may be at programs that teach things differently, and you can kind of pick their brains throughout the summer, and you can watch them day to day in their routines and kind of start to understand the why behind some of the things they do, and kind of start to take some of those things for yourself that work the best. So that's definitely a really, really good way to kind of get, to dip your foot into several different programs at the same time, and to kind of start picking their brain on that. So obviously that's the benefit. Kind of going, the opposite way now with, some, like you mentioned, remote coaching and private organizations and places where you can go and train and develop. The draft has obviously changed a little bit, and not only the draft, but, the minor leagues. There's a lot less, spots now. There's less teams, things like that. So the chances are now a little bit more difficult than they were, just a few years ago. So in order to get into that top, whatever percentage it is to get into the minor leagues and to play some professional baseball, what do you see as kind of the main thing that most kids, talking about high school, college aged, need to be working on? I'm sure it's definitely going to vary, if you've got a guy that's physically developed versus a guy that's not. But from a low-hanging fruit standpoint, and kind of like what some of these athletes need to be focusing on, or at least thinking about, what are some additional options that you kind of see as what they need to be focused on?
Yeah, so like you said, it's not really an option for school, and I know, if you're going through a baseball season, you're doing the same thing every day. Usually, you're sleeping till noon or 1 because it's been a long, long day. You try to find time to go to the gym. Then you have to play every day. So it's like you're kind of getting stuck in this one pattern of baseball. And so I've seen, especially a lot of guys that are coming up now. You're looking at Ben Joyce, Chase Petty, guys that are they're due but are hyper mobile athletes. And then so you're finding guys that have attack mobility but are also extremely athletic. And then I see a lot of people in affiliate ball in college and summer ball, and guys that I see around in high schools and stuff that I look at here, they're missing that athletic component. And I feel it's because they spend so much time trying to chase mechanics A, B, and C versus just kind of being fluid athlete because all they do is baseball all the time, where a lot of the best athletes play basketball, will play football, spike ball. You could play almost anything that kind of keeps you in motion, keeps your movement patterns lateral, it keeps you moving in all different directions. And that's kind of a really low-hanging fruit that I've seen with a lot of athletes. And I think it is because of the stress of I have to go to this tournament, I have to pitch here, I have to pitch there. But also because of that, a lot of guys are very fatigued, very overworked, and they're, especially with PBR and PG and whatever other events nowadays, kids throw nowadays in high school, which is not the same up in Canada, but down here you guys throwing 100 innings in high school. And then you're going to play summer ball, and then it's I have to go to these events. Oh, and then also I'm going to go to school the next year. You've just accumulated a couple hundred innings. And if you're not built up for that, that's going to be really, really hitting hard. So the big thing for me is with the way that finding those programs and those coaches and those remote coaching programs are really beneficial for guys that have high innings or really low-hanging fruit. That, maybe they didn't get a lot of innings that year because they really needed to get in the weight room. They weren't physically strong enough to last a season, or they could not move at any of their positions. So I just think in that case, it'd be more beneficial to find a trainer, find a strength coach, get with a hitting or pitching professional to get into movement patterns, get into positions that are going to be a lot more effective next year versus you getting 70 at-bats where you're still not being able to move, you're not in efficient patterns, you're not being powerful, you're basically just swinging because you feel you have to, versus swinging and finding ways to fix yourself and swing with intent and throw with intent and run with intent. There's so much benefit to skipping those extra reps for more beneficial patterning and then more beneficial reps down the line, especially when you're going into college. I mean, I walked in on campus and I was like, man, there's a lot of guys here that are throwing mid-90s, and I'm like, this is not what I'm used to. And I'm sure going to Mississippi State or going to Ole Miss or guys see at Vanderbilt, especially at Vanderbilt, they don't even give them jerseys. They just, here's a T-shirt and a number. You all look the same. Earn your spot, because they have so many guys. And that's really being apparent now, especially with the transfer portal. Guys that are wasting their time in summers that don't need to be, that maybe threw a lot of innings in the summer, or trying to get to those big schools, or trying to go to their dream school, they are going to their dream school in a few months. If you don't show up ready to go, outlasting everybody, outworking everybody, you could have been their best prospect, but you'll show up physically behind a lot of other players that took the time to master or improve their craft going into college, because it is a completely different game. They usually bring in more players than they need, and they'll make the cuts there. Or, especially nowadays, they're just going to pull somebody that can do the job. And that's a really big change from when we were in college to where it is now, where it's less development. It's if you're not producing, I'll just find somebody at D1, D2, D3, JUCO that will produce, rather than trying to help you get better. And that's the crazy part. And I think that's the way that affiliate ball is going as well. With the less teams, the less players, the less rounds in the draft, is they'll just find somebody else. And that's why I think taking useless reps, or I wouldn't say useless, but taking reps that are not productive, if you have so much limitation, just to face another pitcher, versus spending a couple months getting strong, getting mobile, and getting efficient to be the player that you need to be at the next level if you want to keep playing.
Yeah. So really, obviously there's a lot to unpack there, but the top couple things that I want to kind of clarify to make sure I heard you correctly is, the guys that should play summer ball are the guys who, maybe didn't get as many innings in the spring as they wanted, right? And they took the spring and they, worked on some physical development because they weren't getting those innings, and they built their body up. And they didn't get the innings, so those are the ones that need to go to summer ball to get those innings in, to be able to go and pitch and go and hit and get those game reps that they didn't get in the spring. And then
to an extent, yes. If you've been working, or you've been redshirted, or you're in the weight room and they're working with the coaches, and it's like, hey, I only got 7 innings on the mound, then maybe you need to go see some more guys because you spent the whole year working on something. Versus, that's different than guys who didn't get the innings, but also can't move, who probably need to do a bit better. There is a line, but for the majority of the guys, if you're throwing limited innings, go see someone, go into the summer ball, get your reps in, because it's different facing a hitter than it is throwing to a target.
Yeah, and then kind of conversely to that is the guys that did get a lot of innings, especially like you mentioned, kind of our high school groups, that are throwing, 70, 80, 90, 100 innings in high school that are getting ready to go to college. Those are obviously the guys that, hey, you've got your inning cap. Let's go and rebuild the body. Let's go and rebuild the arm. And on top of that, let's get ourselves ready for college ball, or let's get ourselves ready for the next season, instead of just going and adding, additional volume and additional stress onto the arm and onto the body. Again, whether we're talking pitching or hitting or whatever, kind of take, a step back in the summer and get your body back in a spot to where you can compete long term. And that kind of leads into the third point that I want to make sure I heard, correctly, was, college has changed now. Like you mentioned, the transfer portal has changed so many things. There's not a lot of, going to these big schools like Pitt and Mississippi State and, Vanderbilt and Ole Miss and everything else, and getting 2 years to develop, right? Because those coaches, their jobs are on the line. They've got to win now. They can't wait 3 years to win, right? And with that being said, they're not really going to take time, to redshirt a couple guys and to take 2 years to get them developed. They're going to go straight to the transfer portal, or they're going to go straight to the junior colleges and find guys that are ready now. So kind of what I'm hearing there is with those high school kids, used to, you could kind of go in, underdeveloped physically and still have a good career in college. And now it's a lot more difficult because they need guys that are, I think your exact words were, they need to produce immediately, right? They need to come on campus and they need to be ready to compete now. And that, again, goes back to, are they physically developed? Is their skill there? And you can't just spend all or nothing on one or the other, right? We can't just be a meathead in the weight room and not spend any time on skill. And then vice versa. We can't just be a guy that goes to pitching lessons and does a throwing program, but is never in the weight room, right? So that's kind of what I heard you say. Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, you got to have that balance of both. It is a very physical game, but it's also a very skillful game on each side of the baseball. So you do have to have both. And if you're spending so much time on one side, you will be exposed on the other side. Especially you see a lot of coaches, they do those hell weeks or, whatever you want to call it. I know at Pitt, we ended up starting one, and we brought in, I can't remember the exact company what it's called, but they brought in ex-Navy SEALs. I think it was the program. And they brought in ex-Navy SEALs, and these guys were terrifying to look at. But they pushed you to your limits, and they showed the coaches, how are you going to be under extreme stressful situations? Are you not only mentally tough enough, which playing in baseball games only get you so far. That's more self, but are you physically strong enough to, if you've been running for 3 hours or, you're on your 300th push-up because you guys can't do it in sync. Are you going to just give up on your team, or are you going to keep battling? And if you're not physically strong enough to where you're putting yourselves in stressful situations under a bar for multiple reps, or you're not running hard enough where you're getting tired, but you got to keep getting your sprints in. And it all comes back to just making sure you're getting those stressful reps and you're getting in the weight room or on the mound that put you in these situations, because they will find somebody who has taken the time to get the reps. So it is a very, very different game now, but it is. I think it's being shown more now than ever how important development early is compared to what was before.
Yeah, I would agree with that a lot. And kind of going back to those points, how our college group works in the summers. Obviously, most of them we're getting kind of early May, mid-May even. The ones that are playing in the postseason or deep into the postseason, it might be June or into June even before we start to get them back for summer ball. And how we've structured our collegiate group, at base in the summer is that, they're on a 4-day-a-week development program. So, again, that kind of comes back to, are we, strength training for 4 days because we're, needing more physical development? Or, maybe there's 2 strength days and 2 movement, mobility, power days built in, right? And then on top of that, we have 1 to 2 days where we're doing live at-bats here in the facility as well. So the reason we set it up that way was because kind of to hit both of those, right? To where we're able to provide the physical training for the athletes that need, more physical development. But on the flip side, we're also able to provide those game reps to the athletes that, maybe didn't get as many reps as they needed in, the spring. And that way, we're not having to move across the country, to go maybe throw 10 innings, like you mentioned, and you can get those innings in here as well as that physical development under a program that can, use your pitch count week to week, and kind of linearly progress from there. So that's kind of how we have our college, program set up in the summer. And then on the opposite side of that too, we also have some guys that, maybe have spent, 2 or 3 summers in a row training with us, and they are now in that physical development standpoint to where, they're physically developed, they feel good, and those are the guys that we will send to summer ball, and we'll say, hey, you're in a good spot, you didn't get a ton of innings this spring, or, hey, you did get a few innings, but I'd like to have a few more. Let's go ahead and find a home for summer ball for a certain amount of innings, and let's go get the rest of those innings in, because again, a lot of the athletes that we get are going to have a legitimate chance at playing professionally. And as you're well aware, pro ball has a long season, right? You've got to be ready for several months back to back to back. And those are kind of the guys that we want to kind of go ahead and provide, and build that capacity for the next years, right? Because if we go, 30 innings this year and then we get drafted in, pro ball, and all of a sudden, anything above 40, 50 innings the next year, our body's going to break down because we haven't been ready for that, right? We've got to get those athletes ready to where they can succeed in the future, whether that's just more innings in college the following year or whether that's going into pro ball and they're able to kind of hold up for a long season and things like that. So that's kind of how we have our college groups set up, to where they're getting both the physical and the skill development. But then on the flip side, there's a handful that will still say, hey, I think, summer ball is going to be a better fit. We need to go get you some legitimate innings in front of some scouts and see what we can do from there. I really like where we're at here. I think we should leave it there. Is there, any other really big points that you want to kind of leave for these high school, college athletes or parents that are listening to this?
No, I think we touched on a lot, but you did really bring up that point there at the end, to having that blend of, maybe it is good. Like, I know the Cape, they do partial. You can talk to summer ball teams that do partial seasons. Like, it is good to get out there. I'm not saying it's not good to go out there and show yourself and present who you are. I mean, that's a phenomenal thing to do, and that's how you advocate for yourself. Some teams do that, and some leagues allow you to go there for a month, show yourself off, and then just kind of know when it's time to, hey, I've thrown a lot. Even if I am a 100-inning guy, going there for a couple weeks, showing, hey, this is the kind of guy I am, and then coming back and being like, all right, how do I do this season? What do I need to work on? You're going to have those meetings with your coaches, as we all have. They get pretty intense, and just, finding a program, from like what I hear, like you guys, is that takes both the training aspect of it, and also it then allows you to adapt that onto the mound and get you those innings, those 100 reps, 1,000 reps, to help train those movement patterns. And so when you walk up on campus, they're like, man, you've really done some work, because you want to stand out in that way, not in what were you doing all summer kind of thing. So it's definitely a fine line, but I like the way the baseball is going now. It's let's get really good at our craft and play versus let's just go out there and throw as many as we can.
Yeah. And I like, to your point, I really think that, being able to take advantage of the time that you get in the summer and in the winter is really going to help to set you and your body up, for the season over the long term. So, let's leave it there. I think that was a really good one. I think there's a lot to unpack there from, the high school and college-aged athletes, as well as their parents that are listening to this, trying to make, decision on summer ball. So RJ, man, thanks for joining us today. And obviously, if you liked this podcast, please feel free to share it, rate it, review it. If there's other topics that you would like to hear about in the future, make sure to let us know. RJ, thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it, man.